So I recently bought the former Slate Hill Baptist Church in Albemarle County near Charlottesville, and I'm going to be doing a historic restoration and restoring the building to a house and giving it another life and another use. I had a really wonderful meeting with a former deacon and his wife who was very involved in the church. Their names are Michael and Ruth, and they were so incredibly wonderful and welcoming and warm and helpful, and I cannot thank them enough because they gave me a lot of really important information I'm going to talk about today. So they gave me a brief history of the church, which was really great. I had found out some of this by going to the Baptist Historical Society in Richmond, Virginia, the University of Richmond campus, which had a lot of information, but this is a nice one that's pretty succinct and gives you the highlights, which is great, and it was something they had. On December 22nd, 1868, a council composed of elders, James Fife, William A. Weitzcarver, Joseph H. Fox, John E. Lang, John T. Randolph, and John E. Massey convened at the Slate Hill Meeting House. And this building was originally built, they think, in the 1830s as a Slate Hill meeting house for members of the community, but it was not a church at that time. And so in 1868, they came together and they assembled and organized a Baptist church. The church was started with a membership of 24 who presented their letters from respective churches. Back in the day, to be a member, you had to have a letter from your church and get it transferred. This is a church membership card. And in the early days of the church, multiple Protestant sects, so the Methodist, Presbyterian, Christian, and Baptist held services there in rotation, each having charge of the service once a month. The Sunday school was organized as a union Sunday school supported by all the denominations, so everyone could go every Sunday, but the Baptists had one Sunday a month, and the second Sunday a month the Methodists might have had it, and then the Presbyterians would be in charge of bringing their pastor and organizing a preacher or pastor or reverend to speak. The original record book was written by Reverend John E. Massey, the first pastor, serving from his appointment in 1886 to 1887, and they've got copies of those at the Baptist Historical Society. And then in 1958, they started a building fund to put an addition on the rear of the church, which is an existing cinder block building, and they were able to raise the money and completed the extension in 1960 and dedicated at their 1961 homecoming. And then they had 4 acres of land that were given by Mr. and Mrs. Whitney Stone so that they could dig a well in 1978. Before that, they had just been on 1 acre, which had the original historic cemetery in the very front, which has 4 stone or concrete pillar markers. I'm not sure exactly what they're made out of. And that's the oldest section of the cemetery. And then they went ahead and raised the money, and in 1979 they built the second addition on the back, which was considered the fellowship hall, which had like a big rec room and a kitchen and all that stuff. But prior to 1978, before they got that money raised to dig a well, they had just had outhouses and there had been no well. The well's still there today and still in use. And then they have a list of reverends here, which I'm not going to go through all of them. And then they had their 125th anniversary on July 11th, 1993. And they were an active church up until probably the 20-teens. And then they just didn't have enough members left, so they dissolved and donated the building to the Antioch Baptist Church up the street, which had a little bit bigger membership, was trying to build a school for the kids in the area, and they figured, why not? And eventually I was able to purchase it. And because these 2 particular members of the community had absolutely zero obligation to give me any of this information or to meet with me or even do anything, I had brought some candied orange peel to give to them because they were just so nice, and we had such a wonderful conversation. I spent about an hour and a half with them, and then towards the end they gave me a can of homemade pickles marked 22, which I'm guessing they were canned about a year and a half ago in summer or fall 2022, and I cannot wait to try these. in addition to the history, they gave me some membership rosters from over the years, which will be helpful to me in terms of possibly doing some research about the unmarked graves within the cemetery, because there are several. They gave me a couple scrapbooks that had a wealth of information, which I have not had a chance to fully go through yet. But some of the cool things that came from these scrapbooks is one of their fundraisers, because they did raise a lot of money and donate it to a series of non-governmental organizations and community associations and different things. They would do fundraisers, and here is this really amazing picture of one of their booths where they would sell a lot of homemade goods cooked by the members of the church. And included with that, in addition, one of the things they were really well known for was doing barbecue. They had a great barbecue sauce recipe that I am going to be excited to make one of these days if I can find it. Although I'm not sure I can right now at this moment. But they've got all kinds of great information in these books that I'll go through. And then another important thing they gave me, which was more immediate and pressing, was a map of the new extension of the cemetery, showing where they have cement and metal markers that I can track down and see how they laid out the cemetery plots, including the one plot in this new extension that's been used, all the rest haven't. And the reason why that is very important and pressing to me is because I have had a request for a community member who grew up in the church and went there, and both their parents and all their siblings are buried in the Slate Hill Baptist Cemetery. And they're 91 years old and they would like to be buried there, and I'm going to see what I can do to try and work with them. But I was really horrified and afraid before I got that lovely map, which Michael and Ruth so generously gave me. I was worried if they tried to dig a grave in the cemetery, I was worried we would hit one of the unmarked graves. And so now that I kind of know, don't dig in the older section, here's the newer section, this is the only grave that's been used, and I have a map, and there are markers that we can find, I'm a little more confident in telling someone in the community who has a long history with this church and has family in there that, yes, okay, we can allow the few remaining church members to be buried there. Because it was just having unmarked graves is a whole question mark. And then it also let me know that the cemetery, because I'm not going to be using it as a cemetery, but you have to leave the head markers and the graves that are there, I can move the cemetery boundary, shorten it a little, because I'm not going to use the rear portion of the cemetery ever. It's too close to the well. All the existing graves are far enough away, but there are some proposed plots that are too close that I'll eliminate. So they also do, a couple other things. They gave me some really great information. There was a piece of furniture that just looks like a little, lecture stand, but it's old and historic. And it was left in the church, and I've still got it. And it's in pretty good condition. And they told me that was the original pulpit. And I think that's because I had a handyman come and help me gently pry up some floorboards without damaging them of the built-in semicircular pulpit. And we found that while the wood framing for the semicircular pulpit was old, it was definitely not 1830s old. That would have been put in at some point after it had been a church for a number of decades probably. But the original pulpit is just a little podium cabinet that you would stand at. It's a free moving piece of furniture, and that makes sense. And they asked me if that was still in there, and I said, oh yeah, I remember it. It's got this, this, and this in it. And they said, yeah, we think that's it. And so that was exciting to find out kind of what they originally used as a pulpit for many decades, because they did not have that semicircular pulpit built in. When they built it in, they did do a really good job of making it matching the existing wood trim. There's tongue and groove wainscoting that goes around the entire, all four walls of the sanctuary. And that is original, we think. So it was great that they gave me information like that as well. And they don't really have too many pictures of prior to the 1970s, because then that's when they moved to the area and became very involved. So it's a lot of information from kind of the 1970s onward, but still just having that information and the few pieces of history they were able to hand down, like the original pulpit, was extremely helpful, because when you're restoring these spaces, you don't always know what's original, what's not. You can kind of take some guesses based on the age of the wood. The older it is, the darker it becomes. This is all untreated, unexposed lumber that's inside walls and inside attics and things, and the older it gets, the darker it gets. But again, you don't really know. It's just kind of best guess, and you might be within a decade or two if you're lucky. Yeah, so that's everything on that. Because while I currently own this property, I'm not gonna live forever. I'm just a steward of it right now at this time, and hopefully there'll be many more people to come to take care of this little piece of history. So here's the front vestibule with the original doors. Here's what the sanctuary looks like. We think the pulpit is original, but we don't really know. I gotta have a handyman help me figure out by the age of the framing. We're reasonably confident this drop ceiling is not original, but again, we'll find out. We think the siding here is probably original. So is this old cool door. This addition was built in 1956. And I just found out from some previous church members that this used to be on each side just one big long room, and that they had partitions and those walls got built in later. And this is where it would have ended. This would have been the old office. This might have been one of the only original walls, this one here. But we don't really know for sure. There's an old furnace room in here. And this was built at some point in the 70s. They built this big rec room. And this kitchen, which they left behind literally everything, including all the old dishes, which I've started to pack up. You can go outside. There was a picnic structure here. It fell down. And we'll go walk around the edge of the property. There's a little garage in the back. Here's the rear of the church, the cemetery.